Welcome back to the Contrarian, everybody. Today is Tuesday, January 28th. It is just after the market close, and I'm just making a weekly update video, but also talking, of course, about China's AI project, DeepSeek, perhaps the implications or lack thereof for the global markets, and how it might impact the U.S. artificial intelligence companies and everything like that. There's just a lot of news surrounding AI and tech, of course, this week, and I will talk about gold and silver, of course. These aren't really getting much attention at all right now, at least in the mainstream financial media, but gold is actually very close to setting a new all-time high. And so, in my opinion, gold and silver and the associated companies with them are probably going to kind of come from behind and catch everybody by surprise at some point once everyone realizes that that gold is finally breaking out to new all-time highs, and probably it'll be close to $3,000 an ounce by then. And of course, the real story there is going to be with silver and silver playing catch up. So, first off, talking about DeepSeek, which is China's kind of ChatGPT equivalent, the competitor to ChatGPT and OpenAI's ChatGPT, I think it caught everybody a little by surprise, and I had heard about DeepSeek a few days before Monday. I believe it was Thursday of last week when I first saw it kind of trending on Twitter, and I was just like, what is, or X or whatever you call it now. And in my mind I was like, oh, what is this DeepSeek app or AI tool that everyone's talking about? And for a brief time there, and I think it still might be the #1 downloaded app on Apple's App Store. And I think on Monday that was kind of what caught everybody by surprise, is just how quickly everyone, or not everybody, but a lot of people downloaded this AI program to basically give it a try, which I think is a little ironic because just a few years ago, everyone seemed very concerned by the fact that big tech was, spying on them, or, just doing things with their data that they weren't particularly comfortable with. And then suddenly, it seems like everyone kind of forgot about that, or they aren't worried about that because they go and download an app that, kind of comes from, you could just say, some nationalized Chinese big tech companies, whoever they might be, or whoever the players of best interest there are. And so it's a little ironic that people that quickly suddenly lost concern with their data and who they are sharing their information with. But apparently it's not really in people's interest now to care that much about who knows what about them, because at this point, DeepSeek is effectively just collecting all of this information. I don't know how effective they actually are, or how effective DeepSeek is at actually kind of using information from other people that it has gathered previously and kind of compiling that. But there's definitely the potential for that, and so it's a little interesting to see just how quickly people adopted a technology platform that basically is coming from a totalitarian dictatorship. So, all that being said, the markets sold off pretty dramatically yesterday, especially AI-related stocks, Nvidia, all the semiconductor stocks, of course, all the quantum computing and very generously valued AI stocks like that sold off very aggressively yesterday. And, I wasn't surprised in a way to see that kind of a sell-off. And then also today, when they recovered pretty strongly, I wasn't surprised there either, in the fact that I did see it as kind of an overreaction on Monday to, the news that China somehow developed DeepSeek using substantially less, expensive GPUs and everything like that. Investors apparently were concerned that demand for all of Nvidia's chips and all these other, supercomputers and everything that all these semiconductor manufacturers are coming up with, they're apparently thinking, oh no, is demand going to just vaporize for all of these chips? And despite that, there is still a huge backlog in orders for all of these chips. And so I think today you kind of had investors realize that, perhaps the whole DeepSeek story is a little overblown, and we still don't have that much information in terms of how exactly China developed this. If they did in fact develop it with as little assistance from using these more advanced chips, that would be remarkable. In the field of technology, that would be remarkable if they could somehow do it with using this older generation of chip. And not having to use all these other ones like what OpenAI has to use. So that would be interesting if China did, in fact, develop it without using these advanced chips. My hunch is that, we're not really getting the full story yet. And so I think today, on Tuesday, when the markets did recover, they kind of opened flat and then recovered throughout the day. So I think gradually people just began to realize that on Monday, the whole reason for that sell-off was a little overblown, if not, completely, the wrong reaction to begin with. And frankly, I think it's probably being overshadowed right now just by the fact that, of course, we have the Fed meeting on Wednesday tomorrow. That'll be really interesting to see how the markets react after that. We also have just a lot of news of basically the Trump administration asserting its influence to get, multinational companies and other, countries to invest in the United States and to build factories and, other infrastructure here in the United States. And, you have a lot of news like that kind of pouring in right now. And while I do think it will take time for that to kind of materialize in terms of affecting the U.S. economy, the stock market is going to start trying to price those kinds of things in where, suddenly if we have a lot of, you could say just like foreign investments coming to the U.S., building infrastructure here, that really has not happened in a long time. Generally speaking, it's kind of been the opposite where U.S. corporations have been incentivized, not directly, but the difference in cost of labor especially has incentivized them to build factories and means of production in other countries so that they can then utilize the cheap labor there and ship their products to US. That's effectively going in reverse now. So the whole trend of globalization, for years now I've kind of seen it as almost peaking, like a trend that is kind of reaching as far as it'll go. And if anything, I do see kind of globalization going in reverse now. And that'll have rippling effects throughout the U.S. economy. In the long term, I think it will be kind of a net inflationary type of environment, which, is both good and bad. I mean, it's helpful in the fact that, yes, we are bringing back good-paying jobs to the U.S., and, we're reshoring critical industries, of course, very important to be producing things that are critical here in the U.S., but, the long-term effect of just higher prices, of course, on all of these products, I think does make it, to where a net inflationary kind of environment could be seen, broadly speaking, for the couple next decades. It's a very long-term trend, not to say that it's going directly to more inflation from here, because if anything, I do see a disinflation coming up, but that's more in the long term. All that being said, that does really play well into the precious metals markets because, of course, precious metals are a store of value. It's a real physical store of value, much like farmland or, just real estate would be. So it's a store of value like that. I do see crypto more as a store of speculation, perhaps kind of a store of excess, just almost like a blow-off valve into which excess liquidity goes. And so in a real, I would say, long-term inflationary trend, I'm not sure how well crypto would perform in something like that. But we do know that gold and silver, even just looking around the world, looking at other countries even right now that, for a longer period of time have been stuck in higher levels of inflation, gold and silver do perform very well in those currencies. And so, the United States has been, I would say, fairly blessed in the last several decades in the fact that we have not had persistently high inflation. We've had peaks of it now and then, and of course recently inflation came back into the spotlight, but broadly speaking, we have not struggled with just prolonged periods of inflation. And, with, I would say, the long-term trend of just government deficit spending going out of control, of course, with, the U.S. national debt being where it is, it's very hard to reverse a trend like that once it is started. And effectively now, I do think that inflation effectively has to stay elevated, in real terms, whether or not the CPI takes that into account. And people do figure that out fairly quickly, even if the CPI is a cooked metric. And so, people do figure that out, in terms of if crypto is kind of a distraction from gold and silver, maybe it is, but if it is, I think people will eventually kind of see through that and, want to get out of crypto and get into something that's an actual asset, real physical thing. And at that point, you look around the world, even other countries where crypto isn't criminalized, but that do deal with high levels of inflation. I mean, like Argentina, of course, like Zimbabwe, but that's an extreme example. But you look at countries where crypto isn't criminalized, but that have dealt with high levels of inflation, and it's by and large physical gold and silver where people go for a store of value. It's not to crypto. And so, I will be curious to see how crypto does perform in such an environment, not like what we're dealing with now where everything seems to be getting, liquidity pumped into it, but more in a, I would say, just net inflationary kind of environment. That's, of course, a very long-term kind of thing to observe, but, all that being said, I do remain very optimistic on gold and silver and the miners. Of course, the miners have really lagged. Silver has lagged too, so it's really only been gold that has performed exceptionally well in the last year. And, I believe in the last year, gold is basically on par with the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. I wouldn't be surprised to see gold outperform, and especially silver outperform the market indices from here. Small caps could probably play catch up and could probably do a move like, what I see gold and silver doing. But, from here, I do remain very optimistic on gold and silver and the miners. Of course, they're really being ignored right now, broadly speaking, by the mainstream financial media. And maybe some of that is just, complete disinterest by the public in it. But, maybe some of that is also, I don't know, trying to distract people away from gold and silver. I don't know if there's anything like that actually going on, but perhaps it's a just complete lack of interest on the part of the public. But of course, once that, I would say just lack of interest pivots and people kind of, look in the last couple of years at what kinds of returns they could have had in gold or silver, once they really do start moving, the total interest in gold and silver is going to be probably 10 times what it is now when gold is at, 3,500 and silver's at 50. And that's silver going to 50 from here is a 80%, 70% move. Gold going to 3,500 from here is a, 25% move. So, at that point, I would kind of actually look at getting out myself out of that position. But it's going to be interesting because that's when most people who really haven't had interest in gold and silver are going to try to get in. And so that's why I really kind of call this channel the Contrarian, is because I really kind of look at things when there's very little interest from the public, or generally speaking, people are very disinterested in something, and I see, a fundamental case to be made behind it. And sometimes that plays out well, as I think it will. Sometimes it doesn't. But when it does play out well, it tends to play out well in a big manner. So, that's all I'm going to say on gold and silver. I do remain very optimistic on those areas. I do remain optimistic on the rest of the market, broadly speaking. I think the market narrative going forward is going to be that, look at all of the spending in the U.S. economy that's coming in from, these big tech companies and these other countries building here in the U.S. Look at all of the increased government efficiency that might be coming. We're going to start pricing in all of this growth coming up for the U.S. kind of a thing. I think that'll be kind of the narrative that allows investors to become very optimistic. And so we will really need to wait and see just how that unfolds. But that's kind of what I'm seeing start to happen. Kind of with rippling effects of a lot of the things we've seen in the first week of the Trump administration. So yeah, I would love to know what all of you think about these topics. DeepSeek, AI, U.S. stock markets, and precious metals. Love to know what you think about all of this, and hope to see all of you again.